All right, so exhibition strategy. So this really is going to have us go in and start to look at what's happening with it. How are we going about putting it together? How do we choose what we choose? So we get into our exhibition strategy. Start sitting down and start to think about what are the steps to get to that successful exhibition. We need to deal with this. We need to develop an exhibition strategy. We need to go through that and classify what the exhibits are going to be. We need to go in and devise a path. Last, we need to start to focus on what those experiences are going to be. So what exactly is your exhibition strategy? Well, as you go through and you're developing this, you're putting this together, we need to have some clear goals. So we're talking about clear goals. What is it you want them to get? And when we start breaking it down, the exhibition in this case isn't just a single exhibit. There's multiple things that are going to be inside of that. So we talk about clear goals. What is it that you want them to learn? We start thinking about what do you have for goals. We talk about short-term, long-term. So short-term is essentially immediately. What do you want them to gain from this when they see that? Immediately see it. What is it that they're gaining from it? And then thinking about what are the long-term goals as well. Now as we go through and we start to work with it, as you start to develop the exhibition, there's more than one item in there. So what does that first item provide to you? Why are we seeing this? We'll talk a lot more about that when we get into start talking about the path and then even further into the experiences. So as we start to look at those goals, what is it? Think of the exhibit as a whole. So what we're going to work off of is we're not just saying, oh, they're going to come into this exhibition and they walk out, short term is this, long term is that. What we have the exhibit that's on the wall, single exhibit. It's going to have short term, long term. As we start to put that onto step one, we move to the next part. That's going to build off of what we just had in the first exhibit to the second exhibit. And those short-term, long-term goals for each item then plays into the overarching setup based upon the overall exhibition. By somebody coming in, short-term, long-term. So I don't know what exhibits have you guys gone to that come to mind that you think of when I say exhibition design and start thinking about the goals and processes? Have you not been to any?
Like the teeth exhibit at Art Museum Toledo, like you walk in and it's right there. It's something that always has something like the Art Museum.
I haven't been in the art museum, it's sad to say, in a long time.
It's been there for a long time.
Well, I mean, I haven't been there since, I don't know, probably high school. So like 5 years ago. So like I sit down and think of one that quickly comes to my mind is the Oklahoma City bombing memorial and the exhibit going through there when you walk inside of there, thinking of what you're seeing, what are you choosing to put into there, the goals based upon going into the one room, and then of course the lights go out and the audio starts playing and there's flashes of images that come up on the walls. They indicate, different things that are happening at that time, frozen moments. So how can you go through and begin to work on it? So the goals of that, giving you the experience. So short term, of course, they want you to experience what it was like to be in that building when the bombing took place. And then long term, of course, starting to think through what all, as you take that one little element and you put it onto the other ones, what's there. We start thinking about stuff related to like 9/11. The taking of the beams, and there's beams all over the country that people have taken portions of to use to showcase. So that one individual thing is, a lot of them are looking at the fact that those beams were melted. So what did it take to get there? So what's the short-term goal? Of course, it's that impact of, long-term is to make you really sit there and process what all took place for this to happen. I mean, this didn't, it's not like when something gets cut, it's like, oh, like that, it's done. It's the fact that there's something there, you see it, you know what it ties to, but then to think about how long it had to be superheated to melt. So really sit down and think about what those goals are as they go into it. Now, how many people in here have chosen a theme? Anyone have a theme yet? Okay. So what you'll also want to do, and I'll put something up, I'll probably end up sending an email out related to that, is that when you come back from spring break, you should have a theme together. I've had a few students who've already gone through and in the first part when they selected their space, talked about what the theme is supposed to be, or what the theme is going to be. So with that, start to think of a theme that you want to build it around, and it can be anything. Some people are, I think she mentioned something about like a bakery concept. So as you walk in, being a part of something like that. Because when we talk about an exhibition, it's not necessarily, based upon something historical. It can be anything. I mean, when you walk into a bakery, as long as it fulfills all the requirements we have for the project, you walk in there, you're showcasing key things. What do you want people to come in? They put some apple fritters over in the little common room over there, and they're there, and of course I can't pass them up, even though I'm not supposed to eat them. But, so what is it you're choosing? What are you putting out there? Why are you showing this up? But then also, it's all about that space. So what are the goals that you have with it? The next thing is to go back through and review your target audience. So as you go through and start to think about who is it that's going to come in here? What is their purpose for being there? What is the age requirements for them? As we start to get into the age, the other thing that goes back to that is based upon who's coming in, what is the technology that's there? Do we need any type of adaptive technologies? And we need to maintain, of course, ADA compliance. So when we start looking at things that are video based, we're gonna, we would typically, of course, have our closed captionings in there as well, playing for items. It's a big advantage when we start looking at processing stuff, and there's a reason why even video content, when we push it to YouTube, YouTube does closed captioning for us as long as it's in English. So think about what's going to happen with that. Who's the customer? What is it that's there for? Why are they there? What do they want to see? So as you sit there and you start to think about what it is that you've chosen for that theme, what you're choosing to put in there, why are you putting those elements in there? What does it do? What do we have control over? What senses are we working with? What is, based upon them, what is it work? I mean, you go down to Imagination Station in Toledo and stuff like that, you get into different areas, and age-wise, you can see the changes based upon what age is going to be there. So think about those exhibits themselves. So when we start talking about those goals, think about what are you going to do? What are those activities going to be? What have other people done? There's absolutely nothing wrong with going in and starting to look at, okay, I'm doing something historical based upon this historical setup. What are some other things that people have done? What can we do with them? What technologies are available? How many of you use like a virtual reality headset, VR headsets? No? No? Nobody? I'm gonna get that one up and running then, so that when we come back from spring break, we'll get in there with that. Virtual reality is kind of neat what you can do with space and just kind of go in there and suspend reality that's there. So you start thinking of things from that standpoint and over break, go in and research a little bit on virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. There's a lot of different things in there you can work with. And so think about how that content could potentially work its way into your exhibit. Because we can do some simple things, 3D video. So you get in there and turn your head and see stuff. The other thing with it is just environmental controls. You can go in there and you can start working with images that wrap around, so you can turn and look. So it's a 360 image of a missile turret or something like that. And so you get in there and you can see this stuff, but as it's playing, you got that going on. The narration, but then the sounds. So what are those auditory cues that we can actually pull out, that we can incorporate, that we can add in to, again, make you feel as though you are inside of that space. Look at what other technologies exist. So not only VR, AR, mixed reality, some list as XR, but start to think about what's there. How are people adapting things? I've been exhibits where we go through and they work and they use Kinects. Kinects from like the Xbox 360 that and they use it, and based upon, it can recognize, spatial distances and stuff and spatial relationships. So they go through and they start dealing with erosion, and it models it right there for them. Just pulling the information right from that, and they're able to model what's there. So think about and look at what other people have done. How are you going to create interest? So when we start thinking about creating interest in it, what would publication material look like? Where would those publications end up at? We start looking at interest. What is it that you can do to bring those people into there? Yes, we're going to have stuff on the outside of the building. We're going to think about billboards. We're going to think about flyers, direct mailers, commercials. So what is it that we're going to do to create interest in that? Are we creating an exhibit that's at a specific time to work around what else is going on? Today's President's Day. I mean, you could have built one up till come to today, and all of a sudden President's Day, all the kids are out of school. Hey, let's go ahead and let's get the kids to come in here. Extra credit from all these schools to come in and view what's going on in there. So what is it we're going to do to create that interest, drive that interest? Going back through to our audience, we know what our audience wants, and now what are we going to do to create the interest for our audience? We're not going out and saying this is just going to be for anybody. We have that target demographics. These are the people that we anticipate are going to come here. Now, how do we get them here? And then follow your leads. So what's that mean? Well, as we start talking about following your leads, as you go in and start to work with and have that strategy going on, and who's going to come in here, who's going to be a part of it. There's leads from multiple ways. If you get into designing and you're being set up to design an exhibit, obviously then you're going to follow leads to the people who have ties to what it is that you're working on, what it is that you're creating. People that want to donate to it. So you go in there and you start to look at, okay, who are the people that want it that I can use to, of course, expand out towards my target demographics? Who are the people I can use to get donations to go in and fund the stuff that's in here? Who are the organizations or companies that create the stuff that I'm creating that might be willing to, of course, kick in the production costs of, I need to print this stuff off in exchange for advertising. We'll go ahead and you'll print this stuff, we'll give you advertising space. This is the number of people that are going to come through. This is the reach you're going to have. So we go through and start to look at the leads part of it. I know as designers, we don't often, end up on that end of it. That's more of the business side of making this work. But at the same point, you're going to have your own connections. You've probably worked with service bureaus in the past to create previous content that you've printed for other companies, other situations. Reach out to them. We start getting into advertising. We're doing commercial stuff. Again, reaching out to people. Some of those people are people that you might have been in class with. All of them are connections. All of them provide leads to it. And then when we get to the point of securing spaces, again, reach out to people. Where can you get stuff from? So don't be afraid to go in there and start to look at what we can put together. When we go through and start to slide all this together, you're going to start to find there's an awful lot of things going on with it. Now, what you also need to do as you get working is you need to go through and start to classify what your exhibits are. So what are those printed exhibits? So things that we're going to go through and maybe we start to think of just as your static, 2D, printed, maybe all rectangular format, but we're not really thinking strictly on that, everything is a rectangle. So what else can you do with stuff? Video exhibits. What things are going to be in there? What are you going to add in that are video based? What video do you need? Now, this isn't video in the sense that you have to go and create all the video. But as you start to work in the space, if you're working with something, it's a historical component to it, what can you show on that screen? What exists out there? Searching things like PBS are great places to go in and find that, okay, there's a bunch of public broadcasting that covered this, and we'd like to use that. Most of your PBS type stuff, they're more than willing to allow you to put it back out there for somebody to see it once again. So with that, just simply, of course, PBS is on that, and then all of a sudden you go through and you play what's there. So you start thinking about the video stuff. Audio. What are you doing for audio? This goes into everything. Really thinking about, what are the cues there? Thinking about our senses. What can we do? The more senses that we can engage, is going to happen. It's going to allow us to reach to more people. But as we start to think about senses, what happens when we limit one sense? The others get heightened. So when we go in there and you take away vision, your hearing, your feel, all of that starts to come around. You're like, wait a minute, okay, why the room? It just got dark now. The room's feeling cooler. I think I just heard something over there. So it heightens everything else up. So how can you take that and use some of those skills or some of those things that are available to you to add to that impact? And then we get in, we start looking at the kiosk, some of the other digital interactive type elements. What needs to go into that? So where is that going to fall at? Kiosk isn't something we just, in the end, okay, we're just going to throw this in there. But what are you going to do with that? What are we going to interact with? How are we going to interact with it? And we can work with kiosk designs that are all touchscreen. It's possible to work with things that have controls to them. What type of experiences are you going to be able to expose them to? Do you want to war and design, not that you design one fully in here, but design a sense that you could sit inside of a tank, have a couple screens that would show a view and it starts playing, and just by the controls would change what what you're viewing inside of those screens. So as we start to get with this great thing about this is that you are able to completely explore and go well beyond the confines, because what don't we have to worry too much about in here? Budget. Exactly, the money side of it. So we can go ahead, and these are all pipe dreams. We're making printouts, and we're working with foam core. Those printouts are free essentially because you've already paid for it in tuition, so it's over there. And your foam core is going to cost you $1 a board to be able to cut up and be able to work with. So very limited in the sense of what it's going to cost, but you can go in there. This would be a full simulation there, in that you can mock up what's there and throw some screens up with a seat and controls. There you go. So as you go through and start to work with it, think about what all you can do as you go to classify them. Think about the path now. This is one that's when you get into spaces that, depending on what space you've chosen, depending on entry and exit points, whether they actually come back to one another or not, is going to go through and start to come up with what your path is. So we're talking about path in the sense to how are you going to physically move through that space? How are you going to work with that space? How are you going to be indicating inside of the space for them to continue to move in the proper direction? Ideally, we want to get away from putting arrows on the floor. So you look down and go, oh, I'm walking into the point. I probably turn around and go the other way. So think about what's there. What can you do? How are the various displays that you have inside of there? How are they helping guide us as we move through? One of the easiest way is what order? What's probably the easiest way from a standpoint from order to keep somebody on the same path or something like this? Chronological? So the easiest way, of course, is something along the lines of a chronological order, whether that's time as in today, and then tomorrow, and then continue on in the future. Whether you're going through chronologically, going through and setting up step 1, step 2, step 3. That's the easiest way to, of course, continue to guide people through and allow people to be there. But think about some other creative ways that maybe you can control how the audience starts to move through there. Think about ways you can do it, even to the point to where it's not such a heavy conscious effort to it. Playing around with different methods. So think about what are they going to do as they go through there. As you start looking at the various designs that are going to be displayed, how are they going to begin to interact with the stuff? What items, what elements are you going to be incorporating at each one of those areas? Because what happens when people start moving through this? What's going to start to happen to it? one person in, I send in 2 more people, and I send in 4 people. What's that? Potential crowding around individual areas. So as you go through and start to work with it, as you start to think about placement of stuff, start to identify approximately how long people are probably going to be in that spot. Are we ever going to be able to nail down to where it's this nice, clean, perfect flow? No. What it ends up usually looking like, think about ants. Has everybody sat here and watched ants like walk along? Wow. And you see the ants usually are going good, but then occasionally you'll have these little hiccups where there'll be 2 or 3 ants like stopped off doing whatever, and then all of a sudden, everything goes, and then eventually they move, and that moves on. It's essentially what's going to happen as we go through and we start working through this exhibit as people move into there, is that most of the people are going to flow through. You're going to have these steady paces as you go through and calculate how long it takes for them to read stuff, understand it, move on to the next one. What's going to happen with that is you can kind of build that flow, to think about those things that may take a little bit more time. So kiosk design is going to take a lot longer probably than somebody who stops off and simply reads something that you estimate it takes them 22 seconds to read. So they're reading for 22 seconds, but we've estimated over here on this kiosk for them to work their way through it that they're more in the range of about 64 seconds. So we know that we have that tied up based upon the kiosk design, the people that are sitting there reading the stuff. So as we design that, we need to start to think about, can we move or adjust the way that the exhibit looks that has the kiosk involved, that takes them out of the main traffic path. So now people come up there and like, oh, I don't want to mess with the kiosk, and they want to continue on. We don't have them trying to work around those people. And you'll see this in other locations, the same type of setups. Like I was at the Air and Space Museum back last summer, and they have interactive things inside of there as well, but they're pushed out of the main path. So you actually, as you walk through the planes, that you actually have to see it over there and literally walk over that spot. And then there's stuff that's related to it that is around it. So if you're waiting for your turn to get onto the interactive piece and play the game part, you can still look at the stuff that's associated with what you're about to step in and play with. So as you start to think about how that space works, what's going to happen, what elements are going to be in those areas. So how can we keep people into those? And then we get into the experiences. Why do we go to things? The experiences, right? We don't go to concerts because we're like, wow, I had $50 in my pocket and I decided I wanted a ticket, and I just went there because I wanted to make my money disappear. We go to these things for experiences. Everything that we choose to do in life is all about experiences. So what are the experiences going to be? What experience are they going to have in there? And it's all right to go back and draw on the stuff. What would I like to see? I'm the designer. What would I like to see? Because the great thing about this is you're the designer, but realistically, you're also the client right now. So what is it that you would like to see in there? What things are out there? So again, we'll go back to what's been done before. What's out there that you think is really neat, that would be cool to incorporate with your stuff? Where are they going to happen at? So is everything in the main area? You have your large space? Are you going to cordon off an area that they can step into that, of course, separates everything else that's going on inside the space? Are these things going to happen right out in the open? You know, if we hand you a VR and you're in the middle of a room with a bunch of other people walking around, how many people want to do that? A lot of people don't want to do that. We have the same experience that when we do the college night. We have 2 Quest systems as well, and we set them up, and a lot of people are hesitant to play with them because they're going to be standing here and there's other people walking around. Now our table is usually offset just a little bit to, again, not impede the flow of traffic, and people will start to play with them. But there's a lot of people that are like, I don't know, and then they're afraid to get in there because people are going to be seeing them. So start to think about those interactions and, who's going to take part in them. You don't need to worry about COVID. I mean, I know they deal with sanitizing like crazy everything right now, but we don't have to worry about any of that stuff. This is a perfect world. COVID doesn't exist in our exhibitions. So with that, where are they going to happen at? What can we do with spaces? Start thinking about how can we heighten, what's going on with things. And then really go through and start to break down how long is it going to take at each one of these areas. this is something that we, again, as designers, most of the time, if you're not going into production design or exhibition design, we don't worry a lot about this stuff usually. They come in and they say, hey, we need this interactive element built. This is what it's going to be. Here's the design brief for it. Here's what we're pitching. Okay, sketch the stuff together. Yep. Okay, good. All right, and then you go in and create the stuff in a digital sense, or these are the printouts that we need. Here's the text that's got to go on it. We lay the stuff out. Send the stuff off to the printer. Service Bureau takes it. They ship it straight to them. They mount it and they go with it. But as you start to think about the great thing about being a designer, I push that all the time in all the classes, is we talk about graphic design, digital media, that being the program setup, there's interaction design, but we're all designers. And there's nothing that keeps you, once you build your design toolbox and put this stuff together, nothing keeps you stuck in one area. So as you start to think about that, how can you apply that? How can you continue to expand that? And this is another way that we can do that. We're taking all of these skills, user interface design, we're talking about Photoshop, we're in Illustrator, we're working in multimedia, we're working in video, and then how do we take those and push those out there and utilize those skills to go in and develop and create experiences for people. So as we get into this, as we start to really go, there's a lot that goes into putting this together. You've already found by selecting a space. We've talked a little bit about sound and color. We've talked a little bit about lighting. And we'll continue to dig into those and how they start to play their roles in the other areas that we're ultimately going to get into. So when we start moving, what really goes into it? I got a video here that I'm going to play related to all of this.